From Canada, Citizens Forum, where we look at the important issues of the day through a lens of democracy and media and try to figure out, how do we build a better country for ourselves? Hello, welcome to Citizens Forum. It is Saturday, June the 28th, here in Victoria, British Columbia. And I just want to talk a bit about the week's news. My name is Jack Etkin. This show is about the news and current affairs, but with an underlying theme of we don't have the democracy we think we have, and we don't have the free press we think we have. And that is a big part of the problem. In fact, those are the problems. The rest is the symptoms, like the housing mess. That's not a problem. That's the symptom of a deeper problem, which is that we've lost our democracy and we don't have a free press. So, but news of the week. So a couple of days ago, or maybe it was yesterday, President Trump cut off all trade talks with Canada because of what's called the digital services tax, which I don't think I'd ever heard about before then, although maybe I did. And this was a tax that would mostly hit big American companies like Amazon, Google, Apple, and Meta. Other companies are also paying the tax, but and they would be hurt as well, I guess, by the tax, which isn't to say that they shouldn't be paying it. I don't know if it's a good tax or a bad tax. But these companies do a lot of business in Canada, and they make money here, but they seem to pay very little taxes. I think that's what this is all about. But when I first heard this, I thought, another crazy thing from President Trump. But I've read a little bit about this now, and it wasn't crazy. The Biden administration also opposed this digital services tax, and the tax is going to come into force, I think, within the next week or two. Nobody's really paid it yet, but it's about to happen, so it's very timely. So the Biden government was opposed to it, and it was expected to be an issue. So this is not really a surprise, although it was sort of presented to us as a surprise. I think the tax is fair, but I don't know. I just don't have enough information. And I think other companies have it, but other countries have it, but they may have variations of it. I don't know. But this is something from a guy called Michael Geist, who I'd never heard of, but he is a professor back east, and this is what he focuses on, this kind of law and trade issues. So he says, ignoring the warning signs, why did the Canadian government dismiss the trade risks of a digital services tax? So I think what he's saying in his article is that there are problems with the tax. Now, I don't know where he's coming from. He may be a totally corporate guy. Or not. I have no idea. But, everybody has their own opinion. So I don't know if I'm agreeing with what he's saying, but he's kind of saying there are problems with the tax. We knew that these problems were going to come. We could have suspected that it was going to be a trade issue or a tariff issue, as Mr. Trump has just made it. And, unfortunately, we don't really know much about it. I know nothing about it, except suddenly here it is. Here in British Columbia, our Premier David Eby said this shows that we have to diversify our trade away from the United States. That's basically what he was saying. And Mr. Carney said negotiations are continuing with the United States over all these trade issues. So, I know very little about this, but what I think is, from the little bit I've read, I think Canada is going to give in on this tax, at least for now. And we will continue to move away from the United States. It's been our, number one. Well, I mean, we have a crazy relationship with the United States, but it's been our number one ally officially and trading partner and everything else for my lifetime. But we seem to be moving away from it. And I think that's the real story. The United States is being isolated. It's bankrupt. It's massively in debt. The people have been divided over every possible issue. What I think is happening and has happened is the people at the top have decided, they've really, really damaged the economy and the people of the United States, and they've taken all the money, right? I mean, the United States used to be a successful manufacturing nation with a big middle class. Same with Canada. And, whether or not you like manufacturing from an environmental point of view is another story, but that was the fact. We were a middle class country. Now we see increasing poverty and increasing wealth. And I think the United States has been basically sucked dry, and the power structure is moving themselves to Asia, and they'll take over probably China, which maybe they already control. Who knows? But that seems to be what's happening. And we are seeing the United States be isolated, isolate itself. It's under Mr. Trump, because he is angering and annoying everybody with what he's doing. And a lot of it does seem to be crazy, but maybe not. Who knows? Who knows? Moving on, some very important bills have been passed in Canada over the past few weeks. And that was for Canada, Bill C5, which passed really, I think, just several days ago. In Ontario, they have Bill 5, which passed maybe a month ago. And in BC, we have Bill 15, which passed, a few weeks ago. And I don't know if other provinces are also doing it. But all three are the same in one important way. And that is, they all make big projects that the government says are important. These projects will be easier and faster to build because the governments will remove or restrict the regulations and laws that can slow them down. It's possible that even things like minimum wage laws and worker safety laws can be removed if the government, and we're talking now just really about the prime minister or the premier and the cabinets, they seem to have all the power here. The legislatures and the parliament are increasingly being made even more pathetic than they already are. These big projects, they can be mines or pipelines or, I guess, fracking projects, new dams, nuclear power plants, new ports. Ontario has already started work on the first of 4 new nuclear power plants. And personally, I want fewer big projects, not more. I think we're destroying our planet, and we're destroying ourselves. I'd like to see us move away from cars and to great public transportation. And we can do that. We could do that. I'd like to see less flying, less waste, less overconsumption. And then we wouldn't need more of these poisonous big projects, because these projects are poisonous. All of them. The mines, we never hear much about mines, and I mean, the mines and the metals are the basis of the entire corporate industrial state. So of course their media and their governments are not going to tell us bad things about mines, but mines are an environmental disaster of the first proportion. Massively poisonous. The massive amounts of waste, all the ground up rock has to be stored, as far as I know, in perpetuity. and what chance is there of that? But the corporations don't care. They're making the money now, and we're enjoying the benefits, but we're never told the risks. And it's just out of control. I mean, it's there's no restriction on it. It's just make, and make more money, make more money, make more money. The idea of protecting the planet is like the last thing on anybody's mind. And here we are with all these 3 bills, which just move us even more in those directions. So I think we're moving in the wrong direction. I'd like to see us try to save and protect our planet, not destroy it. I'd like us to move on to a less industrial, less car-oriented society with a lot less consumption and a more natural world. And I'd like Canadians to have that discussion. And I'd like for Canadians to be able to decide how to move forward into the future. But instead, all these bills are already passed. And, these bills are just the next step. We Canadians have never had a voice in what we want done with our country, because really it's not our country. It's the country of the corporations and the 0.01%. It's their country. And we have no voice, right? And I would really like that to change, because the people at the top are destroying everything, right? They have shown themselves to be unfit for leadership, but lead they do, and they have all the power. But our fight has to be for democracy, because that democracy means that people, the public, has the power, not these small gangs who run everything now. One example of the way they run things is the housing mess. And the housing mess has come about, in my opinion, because of a shortage of housing. The corporations who run the housing and the banks and the investor and the financial world, because that's where all the money, not all the money, but a lot of the money that people are paying in the high rents and the high mortgages, a lot of that money is flowing to the investor class, right? That's why they created the shortage of housing, to push up mortgage payments and to push up rents. And they're the owners. And the homeless are just what they call collateral damage, right? They wanted to have such a shortage of housing that at the bottom there's nothing, nowhere for people to live. It didn't used to be that way, but somehow not only did they do it, but then they blame the homeless, right? And it's an evil group at the top, that's for sure. So I want to talk a little bit about NATO and the housing crisis, and because this is what I think. We're told that because of the threat from Russia, we now have to spend 5% of our GDP on the military. And here's a story from CTV. Prime Minister Mark Carney is committing that Canada, along with other NATO allies, will invest 5% of GDP on defense by 2035. A pledge that will mean billions more in spending per year. Actually, if we go up to 5%, that is an extra $90 billion a year more on spending in the military, or what they call the military here. An extra $90 billion a year. That's what they're talking about. And I really, I've been noticing this for weeks now. I really think Carney has some great speechwriters, like they used to work for Churchill. So this is what Carney says about this 5%. Throughout Canada's history, there have been turning points when the world's fortunes have been in the balance. And each time Canada has chosen to step up, to lead on the path of democracy and freedom. We are once again at one of those moments. If we want the world of tomorrow to be shaped by our values, Canada must be ready. And, I just don't believe him. He's a corporate banker. But when he came in, who knew what he was going to do? But from what I've seen over the past little while, the past few months of his prime ministership, I mean, he's a very talented and capable guy. You got to say that for him. But who does he work for is question number one. And I'd say he obviously works for corporate Canada, and we are being taken to places that we may not want to go. But we'll see. I mean, the problem is that while we see he's doing it, right? And where's our parliament? Remember we used to have a parliament? Now we just have Carney going around the world, and parliament is shut down again. Like, who cares, right? Parliament. But parliament is pathetic. I mean, it's become pathetic over the past many decades. But it is supposed to be where our democracy is, in these people who we elect and who represent us. And they haven't represented us for a long time because we've largely lost our democracy. We've lost control of the people we elect, and they're controlled by the party leadership, which is very dangerous for the rest of us. But Mr. Carney is taking it to new heights. I mean, he's just doing stuff in Parliament. Mr. Trudeau shut it down for months, illegally. I really think illegally. But even Parliament didn't fight back, right? I mean, it's pathetic. We're supposed to be a parliamentary democracy. Canada is supposed to be a parliamentary democracy. The power is supposed to be in Parliament. It oversees the government. The government does not, meaning the Prime Minister and the cabinet. The Parliament oversees the government. But now we have a case where the government runs the Parliament. And that means that if the corporations control just the Prime Minister, that one person, because that's where all the power is, then we're screwed, right? And of course they control them, because we sure don't. And we are screwed, which is why we have the housing mess and why we have the healthcare crisis. It's because we're irrelevant. Right? What we want is the last thing on anybody's mind. So anyways, getting back to NATO and 5%, which is an extra $90 billion a year, we're told that because of the threat from Russia, we now have to spend 5% of our GDP on the military. And believe me, I would love for Canada to have a good and strong military, but a democratic people's military, not necessarily one that is run by the 0.01% at the top, which is who run everything, including our military. Where's this money going to come from? Either we have to borrow it, which means then we have to pay it back, or cut programs, which I think is going to happen. Those two things will happen. Or we can tax the banks and tax the oil companies, but I don't think those things are going to happen. Also, I think the war between Ukraine and Russia never had to happen and shouldn't have happened. And there was a lot of expert opinion out there that this war between Russia and Ukraine was really started by the lunatics who run the United States. And that's what I think. And this new war was done with the full support of Canada's media and Canada's politicians, who always and only told us the official story, which is the story of evil Russia threatening to expand and take over Europe. But there's another story out there, which is, I won't go into the details, but I have on other shows. But basically that this war did not have to happen, and it was pushed and pushed and pushed by the people who run the United States until Russia responded. And I mean, when I say pushed and pushed and pushed, I mean in eastern Ukraine, where a lot of Russian-speaking people who are very closely tied to Russia live in those areas, they were attacked by the Ukrainian government, and thousands of people were killed, right, until Russia responded. So and maybe that story is correct. Maybe the official story is correct, that there was no reason for this war and Russia started it. I'm not saying it's not correct. I don't believe it. But what I do know is correct is that there are experts, professors, diplomats, politicians, ex-military, ex-CIA, journalists, and all these other experts who say that maybe it wasn't Russia's fault are completely censored by the corporate media in Canada and the United States and not talked about by our corporate politicians. I mean, there is as much expertise out there that is saying a different story as is saying the official story. But we are only allowed to hear the official story. And I say that is very dangerous. Censorship is dangerous. We're seeing it happen now. But people believe in the government and the media so much, and they really believe that the government media are telling them the truth, that they're quite happy. They don't, people don't even see that there is another story out there because it's never told. And I completely believed all that for most of my life. But now, over the past maybe 30 years, maybe more, I've come to see that Canada is not the great democracy they tell us it is, and we do not have the great free press that they always tell us we have. And it's dangerous. Censorship is dangerous. So again, we're told Russia's the enemy, and maybe they are. I don't know, but I do know, based on my lifetime experience, that I don't trust or believe the media. I don't trust or believe the politicians. I don't trust or believe the governments. I don't trust or believe the RCMP. And I don't trust and believe CSIS. And that's basically where the Russia story is coming from. So now we have to spend $90 billion a year more on defense against Russia and China. And if we had spent that $90 billion just one time, but we're going to be spending it every year if this plan that they've got moves ahead. Who knows if it will? But if we had spent that $90 billion a year just one time, say $10 billion a year over 9 years, over the past 9 years, if we had done that and spent it on housing, we could have built 270,000 nice homes for people in Canada. 270,000 homes. But there was never any money for that, right? And plus, they don't want more homes. The whole basis of the housing crisis, the high rents, the high mortgages, the homelessness, was to create a shortage of homes. That's what they did. And it's economics 101, I think, that if you have a shortage of something as necessary as a place to live, it will push prices up. And at the top, they're just collecting all the money, right? When you pay the high rents and people pay the high mortgages, and lots of people aren't. They're doing okay, but lots of people are. Those people are being sucked dry to feed the profit insanity at the top who can't get enough and who don't care and who control our governments and control the media and have the power to create a shortage of housing in Canada. Because I think that's exactly what they did. And again, maybe I'm wrong, but from what I've seen, that's exactly what they did. And if there were more homes, if we had built those 270,000 homes with the $90 billion, then prices would be lower and rents would be lower. And mortgages would be lower. But they don't want that because with the high rents and the high mortgages, money flows up to the top and the people at the bottom get screwed. And Canada's run by the 1%, not the 99%, and has run for the 1%, not the 99%. So that's why we have billions of dollars for NATO, it seems, but we never had it for housing. And that's just one example of what a great democracy Canada is. But, and I think this is the most important part, it's funny, we seldom hear about real solutions, and they always come at the end when nobody's listening anymore. They should come at the beginning. So next show, the solutions will come at the beginning. But there is a solution, I think, to all of this. one of many solutions, and that is for people to join or rejoin your favorite political party and work to democratize it. And when I say democratize the political party, I mean give the power to the party membership and not the party leadership, because that is another big problem in Canada. I was just in the BC NDP for 2 years. I quit recently, but I was in there for 2 years. And I don't want to pick on the BC NDP, but it happened to be the one I joined. But I have a feeling all the other big political parties are exactly the same. And the BC NDP is big because they are actually the government here. And from my 2 years in the party, I can say with 100% assurance, although maybe I'm wrong, but I completely believe that that party is a democratic nightmare. All the powers at the top, the party is supposed to control, what the politicians do. There's, the party is supposed to be setting policy. And the party membership are supposed to have the power to do that. And in the constitution of the BC NDP, it says that very clearly, that the party membership shall control the party. But the reality is that this gang has taken all the power into their own hands. And because there's no oversight of a political party, once they get the power, especially when they can't be removed, especially when they are working together with the media, who will never raise that question of, hey, who do our political parties really work for? Right? Are they democratic? Because if you look at the reality, you'll see they are totally undemocratic, but the media never looks there. Why not? Because, of course, the parties are controlled by the same people who own the media. So why would their media start telling us that there's something very fundamentally wrong here? That ain't going to happen. But that's where we're at. So, in my 2 years in the BC NDP, I found all the membership is totally irrelevant. All the power is at the top. And it seems to me, by looking at what the provincial BC NDP government is doing, that they work for big business, because they do. I mean, if you look at what they do, that's exactly what they do. They work for big business, the same as any other government in Canada works for big business. And if you don't work for big business, you are not going to be the government of Canada or of a province, that's for sure. The media will destroy you. And the problem there is that we trust and believe their media. So if they start saying, this politician is terrible, look, blah, 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 that politician's career will be destroyed, right? Very quickly. So that means that anybody who is going to speak out again, you start talking about taxing the banks, right? Or really putting cars off not putting cars off the road, asking Canadians if we'd rather invest in good public transit rather than more and more and more cars, and all the problems they cause. We should have been doing that 50 years ago. But of course, it never happened because they don't want it to happen. So here we are. And I'm going to end it on that, but somewhere here, I Googled, are we destroying our planet? Because to me, this is what it's all about. I mean, if we're destroying the planet with what we're doing, then I think we've got to change, right? And that's just it. If we're destroying the planet, I think we got to change, but we can't because we have no power. And who knows, maybe we don't want to change. Maybe we don't. But anyway, so I Googled, are we destroying our planet? And what I got was, I'm not sure if this is AI, but it's called Sentient Media. I think that's who this line is from. So I'll just read it. It says, the bottom line, Humans are slowly but surely destroying the ecosystems that we rely on. If we don't reverse course soon, and I think it's already too late, but they say soon, the damage may eventually make the planet inhospitable to our own species and many others. So, to me, that's the fundamental question. What do we want to do? And I'd like us to have a voice in that discussion, but we don't, because the corporations own the media and the corporations own the government, and it's that democracy that we've lost that we have to get back. And one way that I can think of doing it right now is for people to join or rejoin your favorite political party. And yeah, you can be there to fight for the stuff you want, but more importantly, not push for it, but make it happen. We've got to democratize our political parties. We cannot have the power in the hands of the gang that always takes over, the leadership gangs, because they are not our friends. They are people with an agenda, it seems. So the power's got to be given to the party membership. And I think if we did that, and if our political parties were really controlled by the party members, which can be all of us, we can all join our favorite political party, then I think Canada would be a much, much better place. I don't think we'd have the housing mess we had. I think we'd have better communities, better lives, less stress, more health, less sickness, better healthcare, fresher air, and on into Hollywood. And we'd have less billionaires, right? And the banks would be taxed, and there'd be decent housing for everybody, and et cetera, et cetera. So thank you very much for watching today, and thank you for watching.